So you want to get rich mining the ocean floor. Here's the number that should stop you cold before you even start. $150,000. That's what a single deep-sea mining ship burns through every 24 hours just to stay in place. Not to mine anything, not to find anything, just to float there and exist. Run that for 2 months and you've burned $9 million before a single rock comes out of the water. 4 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, sitting in total darkness under crushing pressure, there's a pile of dark, potato-sized rocks. They don't look like much. But scientists estimate that across the global seabed, these rocks hold over $20 trillion worth of nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese. That's enough battery material to power every electric vehicle on Earth for generations, and enough to break China's grip on critical mineral supply chains. It sounds like the easiest gold rush in history. You picture a research ship gliding over calm water, a robotic arm reaching down, a spotlight hitting a seafloor covered in free money. You assume the hard part is finding the rocks. You're wrong. The hard part isn't finding them. It's staying in business long enough to pick them up. The real battle isn't on the seafloor, it's in the fuel logs, the crew contracts, and the insurance paperwork sitting in an office 3,000 miles away. So let's build one of these operations from scratch, line by line, and watch the money disappear into the ocean. Step 1. You need a ship, and not just any ship. You need a dynamic positioning support vessel, a floating industrial giant built to hover over one exact GPS coordinate in open ocean swells for weeks without ever dropping anchor. It does this with computer-controlled thrusters firing constantly against wind, waves, and deep currents, holding position within centimeters. A ship like that costs anywhere from $40 million to $120 million, whether you're buying one outright or retrofitting an existing vessel with the cranes, moon pools, and power systems mining requires. That's before it leaves the harbor, before a single contractor steps on board. That one asset alone can cost more than an entire professional sports team's yearly payroll, and it hasn't earned a single dollar yet. Now you have to crew it. This isn't a skeleton crew of sailors. It's a floating offshore city, completely cut off from land. You need marine officers, dynamic positioning operators, crane captains, high-voltage technicians, and systems engineers. Then, a second crew on top of that, robot pilots, deep-sea geologists, oceanographers, marine biologists, data analysts, compliance officers. You're housing, feeding, and paying 60 to 90 highly specialized professionals in one of the most remote places on the planet. Factor in hazard pay, rotation flights, and specialized insurance, and payroll alone runs $2 to $4 million a month. That's a small tech startup's entire yearly budget, spent every 30 days just to keep people alive and working out there. And insurance isn't a small line item either. Underwriters look at a 60,000-ton vessel holding position over open ocean, running experimental machinery nobody has fully stress-tested at 4,000 meters, and they price that risk accordingly. Hull coverage, equipment coverage, and crew liability for an operation like this can add hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on their own before a single claim is ever filed. Then comes the hardware, and this is where the engineering gets brutal. You're sending machines into total darkness, freezing temperatures, and pressure over 400 atmospheres, pressure that can crush a standard steel pipe like a soda can. To survive down there, companies build massive seabed collectors, tracked crawler vehicles the size of a 2-story house weighing up to 90 tons. They drive across soft, gelatinous mud, vacuum up nodules, separate them from sediment, and pump everything up through a flexible pipe thousands of meters long. One of these crawler systems can cost $30 to $50 million in custom engineering alone. Every part has to be built to aerospace tolerances, because if a hydraulic line blows at 4,000 meters, nobody's sending a diver down with a wrench. If the tether snaps and you lose the crawler, you haven't just lost a machine, you've lost your entire survey window, because building a replacement takes 18 months in a shipyard. And here's what catches even experienced offshore engineers off guard. Almost none of this equipment is standardized. The seabed isn't flat. In the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, the massive stretch of ocean between Hawaii and Mexico where the richest nodule fields sit, the terrain shifts constantly. Flat plains here, extinct volcanic ridges, and deep trenches there. A crawler built for one terrain gets stuck or flipped in another. Every depth, Every soil type, every mineral bed demands custom engineering. You're not buying equipment, you're funding aerospace-grade research and development on every single trip. Now look at the engine room. A ship this size doesn't sip fuel, it devours it. To hold 60,000 tons of steel locked over one point in the ocean while powering cranes, pumps, and winches, it burns 15 to 25 tons of marine gas oil every single day. At current prices, that's $25,000 to $40,000 a day in fuel alone. Over a standard 60-day trip, your fuel bill alone climbs past $1.5 million. And that's before counting the 2-week transit out from a port like San Diego or Honolulu and back. You're burning hundreds of thousands of dollars just driving to work. To put that daily fuel number in perspective, that's roughly what a Formula One team spends running a car for an entire race weekend. Except the ship doesn't get a trophy at the end. It just gets to keep floating so it can try again tomorrow. But none of that is even the most expensive part of this business. The single biggest cost on the balance sheet is compliance and environmental monitoring. Before anyone touches the seafloor, international regulators demand full environmental baseline data. That means deploying underwater vehicles to map the seabed with sonar, dropping traps to catalog deep-sea life, sea cucumbers, ghostly white crustaceans, corals that exist nowhere else on Earth. Here's why that matters so much. When a 90-ton crawler moves across the seabed, it doesn't just pick up rocks. It kicks up massive clouds of fine sediment. Scientists believe these plumes can travel for hundreds of kilometers, clogging the delicate systems deep-sea creatures use to filter food, disrupting bioluminescent communication, and burying ecosystems that have sat in total stability for millions of years. Monitoring that requires real-time sensor arrays, acoustic trackers, and secondary scientific robots following the plume in 3 dimensions. Designing and running that environmental assessment adds $3 to $6 million to a single survey. And here's the detail that should really sit with you. When scientists went back to test mining sites in the Peru Basin that were disturbed back in the 1970s, the crawler tracks were still visible in the mud 50 years later. The ecosystem never recovered. Bacterial life never returned to normal. Down there, sediment builds up at a rate of a few millimeters every 1,000 years. Whatever you disturb stays disturbed on a timescale that doesn't match a human lifetime. Now stack it all together. The ship, the 60-person crew, months of fuel, custom robotics built for one specific patch of seafloor, environmental sensors running around the clock. Added up over a standard 60-day campaign, and the total bill lands at $9 to $12 million. Here's the part that makes this whole business a gamble. You can spend every dollar of that and come back with nothing. The sonar maps might have overestimated how many nodules are actually down there. The mud might be too soft, and your 50-ton crawler sinks to its axles. The currents might be too violent to safely run the pipe without snapping it against the hull. On land, if a drill hits bad rock, you move the rig 50 yards down the road and try again. In deep-sea mining, if the site fails, you've just burned your entire quarterly budget on a single negative result, with nowhere else to move the ship on that trip. A huge share of these expeditions end in exactly that, an extremely expensive no. Think about what that actually means for the people funding this. It means writing a check for $10 million with the full knowledge that the most likely outcome isn't profit. It's a very detailed, very expensive map of a place that doesn't have enough valuable rock to justify going back. Most industries don't ask investors to accept those odds. Deep-sea mining asks for that bet every single time the ship leaves port. That's the story hiding behind the trillion-dollar headlines. For years, pitch decks sold investors on the size of the prize. Trillions of dollars in metal sitting on the seafloor, ready to power the clean energy shift. Money poured in. Companies went public with valuations in the hundreds of millions. Then reality caught up. As sea trials dragged on and commercial timelines slipped from years into decades, investors realized they were funding a bottomless hole with no clear path to revenue. Several of the highest-profile ocean mining companies have seen their stock prices collapse by 80 to 90% from their peak. Millions in investor money evaporated while ships sat tied up in port, still burning money on dockage fees and crew retainers, waiting on legal frameworks that still don't exist. At the center of all of it is a regulatory standoff. The body that governs mining in international waters represents over 160 countries, and they can't agree. Developing nations worry about environmental damage in waters nobody owns. Land-based mining nations worry that cheap ocean-sourced nickel and cobalt will crash their own economies. Environmental groups want a full ban until anyone actually understands the long-term damage. Without a finalized rulebook, commercial mining in international waters is still, legally, not allowed to happen. So companies sit there, burning cash on standby, waiting for politicians to agree on the rules of a game nobody's allowed to play yet. That's the trap at the center of this entire industry. You can't raise the money you need without proving the technology works. You can't prove the technology works without spending money you don't have a legal path to earn back yet, and every month that standoff continues, the fixed costs, crew, dockage, insurance, maintenance, keep running whether the ship moves an inch or not. Step back from the spreadsheets and the crawler blueprints for a second, because this isn't really a story about robots and rocks. It's the same story humans have told over and over. From the first coal mines to the first deep-water oil rigs, we've always pushed into hostile, unproven frontiers to get the resources we think we need. And every time, the pattern is the same. The first movers absorb catastrophic losses testing systems nobody has proven at scale, so the rest of the market can learn from their mistakes. The world wants electric cars. It wants grid-scale batteries, wind turbines, and solar panels. But land-based mining for those same metals, nickel in Indonesia, cobalt in the Congo, comes with its own brutal cost: deforestation, toxic waste, and in some places, human rights abuses tied directly to the supply chain. The deep sea offers something different: no forests cut down, no villages displaced, just rocks sitting quietly on the ocean floor. But the ocean charges its own price, paid in crushing pressure, catastrophic capital costs, ecological risk to places humans have never touched, and a daily burn rate big enough to break even the best-funded companies on the planet. A deep-sea mining ship was never just a research vessel hunting valuable rocks in the dark. It's a multi-million-dollar bet that the world's hunger for these minerals will eventually get desperate enough to justify today's absurd math. The ships are built, the crews are ready, and 4 kilometers down, the rocks are just sitting there, completely silent, waiting. The ocean isn't in any hurry to hand them over, and every single day, the clock keeps running on the cost of just showing up to ask.